I was reading a book on strategy a couple years ago, and it posed the question, to really think deeply about strategy and how a market and a competitive market might evolve. Ask the question, pick a market leader. In my case, I did Salesforce. What would have to be true for Salesforce to fail? And not necessarily fail, go out of business, and all 8 million people that work for Salesforce are out of jobs, because that's very unlikely extremely unlikely to happen. I wouldn't say impossible, because, nothing's impossible, but it seems exceedingly unlikely. But like for Salesforce to turn into IBM, right? Like eventually it's probably going to happen. I think it would be hard to keep up, Salesforce hitting home run after home run. And I haven't paid too much attention closely, or I haven't paid close attention to the company lately, so I can't say they have hit home run after home run or not. I'm not sure exactly where they are, but it's an interesting question. What would happen? What would need to be true for something like Salesforce to fail? And I wonder if we're getting, with the complexity of demand gen, I wonder if this complexity is bringing us closer to an era where Salesforce, HubSpot, these basic CRMs are just not equipped to handle the complexity of what demand gen is going to be in a couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that, as you were saying that, I was like, well, Salesforce disrupted Oracle, and, Oracle is now kind of a dinosaur. And then I looked at the stock price, and actually the stock price is still up and to the right on Oracle today. So I agree. I think it's maybe Salesforce as a product will get disrupted, but I would not short that stock. I think they'll continue to figure out ways to acquire or build their way into more value and more revenue, quarter over quarter and year over year. I do think that, I think it was Thomas Tungus just put up a post that talks about the system of record, aka a CRM, like a Salesforce, is a place to house workflows of workers, and AI or kind of AI agents, digital coworkers, have different workflows than human workers. And so what that means is there is an opportunity to disrupt the CRM today if those AI agent workflows continue to prove valuable, because then you don't need the workflow. The workflow is going to look very different. So I think that there is probably an inflection point happening right now, where specifically around generative AI and LLMs, that is opening up a vulnerability for Salesforce. And, I think there's also, even just like using unstructured data, I think the architecture of Salesforce is pretty outdated. I mean, I've seen this especially in the PLG world. Salesforce's architecture doesn't support a PLG motion and all of the data that's required to run a PLG motion. And so you see the center of gravity shifting from the CRM into the data warehouse. So I do think that that's probably going to continue to happen. How it happens, or which player figures out how to build the right wedge and then execute against that, obviously that's the $1 billion, the $100 billion question. But I do think that probably will happen. I mean, look, at the end of the day, reps don't really want to work out of Salesforce. Sorry, Mark. That's just the truth. And, I think that the actual day-to-day workflows are happening elsewhere in the fastest growing companies. And the outcomes of that might point back to the CRM, sure. But that's just a database. And there's kind of, in my opinion, actually no moat other than the stickiness of Salesforce. And we're all used to using Salesforce for the past decade or two. So, probably it'll be around for another decade or two at least. But I do think that there's probably going to be really interesting tools that pop up that look very, very different than Salesforce or HubSpot.
Yeah. I mean, if on the Salesforce's moat or their differentiation, I feel like in the beginning they probably had, is there, with network economies, is it more valuable? And there are some cases where if I'm using Salesforce and my customers are using Salesforce or my partners are using Salesforce, there's value there, but that's kind of thin. I think the biggest competitive advantage that Salesforce probably has at this stage is switching costs. That moving out of Salesforce is a pain in the ass. It's why HubSpot is giving away, or I don't know if they still are, but was giving away their CRM product for free because it's the gateway drug to their marketing tools and then their paid CRM tools. And suddenly you're paying them $30,000 a year. The switching, nobody wants to switch an ERP or a CRM. And so I think, as something that's going to keep Salesforce afloat. And when I say, what would it cause it to fail? I'm not thinking about the next 5 years. I'm thinking about 50 years,
Yeah, totally. The CRM is, what is it? The carpet or something? It's like the first thing that gets bought and the last thing that goes. I think that's still true today.
Totally. I still think it was a bad idea to start a CRM company back in 2012. That was yours truly. But I've
learned. Is it a good time to start it now? Would you start a CRM company now? You think somebody will actually disrupt Salesforce or HubSpot?
I think somebody eventually will. It's almost a guarantee that somebody will disrupt Salesforce or HubSpot.